Hey there, welcome back. KCAA Radio. This is the Real Men of Real Estate radio talk show. This is Patrick Franz, the Note Mentor, your host, back from break. And I'm glad you stayed because, boy, I'll tell you, you don't want to miss this. My mentor into the note investing world, Desi Arnaz, was nice enough to say, wow, Patrick, if you're going to do your first radio show ever, I'd love to be your first guest. And I really appreciate it. And just before the break, we introduced him, and I gave your little background, Des, which just sometimes just impresses everybody that hears about what you've done. But for those of you who may be new listeners, he's a professional investor, Desi is, since 1982. So he's not new to this game. He's a landlord. He's owned several rental properties. Okay? He's flipped hundreds of houses. You can smile. It's you I'm talking about. Flipped hundreds of houses. He's been a real estate broker since 1980. He's been a part of over 5,000 real estate transactions.
Yeah, I'm old, I know. That's another way of saying it, right?
And but today, Desi invests in real estate debt, also known as mortgage notes. And at the beginning of the show, I explained a little bit to the folks what that is. But Desi, feel free, introduce yourself and let people know your story and kind of how you got into notes after all these years of being a professional investor.
Well, thank you, Patrick. I'm so glad to be here on the radio, on your radio program. This is exciting to me, and I appreciate you inviting me out. I'm happy to share because I'm a big believer in what I'm doing today, and I really think it's important for people to know what I'm going to be sharing because it's life-changing. I've seen it for myself, and I've seen it in so many others. So, yeah. Well, let's see. As you said, I've been in real estate a long time. Yeah, I'm old, okay, but that's okay. Sometimes with age, hopefully comes some wisdom. And I started my career way back in the 80s as a real estate agent, then a real estate investor, and then I owned a couple of mortgage companies, things like that. But in 2013, I found out about mortgage note investing, and I didn't know what it was. As a matter of fact, it was on the 4th of July, Patrick. I call it my personal Independence Day. That's the day I kind of came into my own in this space. I was up early in the morning, as I am most of the time, because I love early mornings. And I was waiting on my wife to wake up. We were going to go down to the beach here in San Diego. And while I was waiting for her, I was surfing the internet, and I found this guy on the internet who said he owned 400 mortgages on condos in Florida. Young guy, looked like he was in his 30s or something, and I thought, how in the world do you own 400 mortgages? I mean, I owned at that time 28 rental properties.
28?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That's not a lot these days. I hear people owning hundreds. But
sure.
To me, it was a lot. It was working me like a horse, But this guy had these 400 mortgages, and I thought, how do you do that? And so I started watching some of his videos on YouTube. And as it turns out, he was coming to San Diego the very next month. And for $1,000, you could have a weekend with this guy, right, to kind of pick his brain.
Sure.
So I decided I'd go pick his brain, and that's what I did. For $1,000 to spend time with a guy like that, why not? So when I got there, he started talking about investing in mortgage notes, which was new to me because I've been borrowing money to buy houses.
Oh, yes.
All the time, right? Borrowing money to flip properties. But I had never been on the other side of the table, and I didn't really know that I could be on the other side of the table. But once I went through his training and I kind of got the idea of it, I realized, okay, I've been on the wrong side of the table. And for a lot of people like me that know real estate or just they know that real estate is a great way to make money, they may not always realize that they can actually own the paper. They can be the bank for a particular homeowner. And so I decided I was going to start divesting myself of my real estate. And I started selling off my real estate. It took about 3 years. I got rid of everything and put all my money into paper. And ever since then, man, it's just been a great ride. I took some time off and started what I called semi-retirement for a while until my daughter came to me and said she wanted to learn how to invest in notes. She was a loan officer working for a bank in San Diego. And she said she wanted to learn how to invest in notes and do what me and mom do. Right? And so I took a little time with her, Patrick, and started teaching her how to do this stuff. And before long, a few other people were asking me to share with them, and then a few other people. And now I've had over 400 people that I've mentored into the note space. And this opportunity is huge for me, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, and Desi, what was always strange to me when you said that you've been a real estate investor for almost as long as I've been alive, and you've done everything there is to do with real estate investing. But you said only 7 years ago or so you heard about notes, and I feel like that's quite common. Right. Once you know about note investing, you realize that it's never been a kept secret. People have been doing this for years and years, but it's not very mainstream, right? You can't turn on the home and garden television and find a note flipping show.
Right.
So I feel like a lot of people just don't even understand that this investment vehicle exists out there. Why do you think that is?
Well, I asked myself how I could not know. I had been in the business for decades and even owned a couple mortgage companies. How could I not have known? And so I did a little bit of research. Do you mind if I share with you what I found out?
No, please. I'd love for the listeners to understand your story.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to give a little backstory then, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Back in 1932, Congress approved the creation of Fannie Mae. I'm sorry, FHA initially, right? And the purpose of it was to spur the economy on. Well, people were buying a lot of real estate, and there were a lot of mortgages being written. And what happened was after about 5 or 6 years, the banks that were lending money under the FHA program were starting to run out of cash. And so Congress then, in 1938, approved the creation of something known as the Fannie Mae. You've all heard of Fannie Mae, right?
I think a lot of us have, yes.
Yeah. Fannie Mae, their job was to create a space where mortgages could be bought and sold, kind of like stocks. Like the stock market, but a mortgage market. And that's literally what they did. It's called the secondary mortgage market. And in that space, wealthy people, large insurance institutions, and banks have been investing since 1938. But the rest of us have been locked out of that space. And that's why most of us don't know about it. However, in the last crash, I call it the Great Depression of 2008, okay?
Nasty.
Yeah, it was nasty. It was bad. That system got overwhelmed with mortgages, mortgage defaults, I should say, foreclosures. We all know about that, right? It got to the point that people were living in their house for a year or 2 years or 3 years without making a mortgage payment, and were not even getting foreclosed upon because there was not enough infrastructure in place to make it happen. And so what Fannie Mae started doing, Fannie Mae gave an edict to all these banks, you guys got to get this stuff off your books. And so they started selling off these defaulted mortgages to hedge funds, large hedge funds who would write giant checks. And that trickled down to where we are today. That's where our funding, our assets and our inventory come from, hedge funds.
I feel like that reminds me of a movie that I like to watch a lot. It's actually a good movie for those of you who haven't seen it, but it's called The Big Short.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's called The Big Short, and The Big Short is a
that.
movie that depicts or explains how the mortgage meltdown in '08 happened. And so what you're saying is that maybe prior to '08, it was a smaller club to be in. And after 2008, because this secondary market got flooded with mortgage notes, it created a market in which regular folk, if you want to use that term, regular folk can buy one of these mortgages and own one and become the bank and collect mortgage payments, is what you're saying.
That's correct. Yeah, it just wasn't even there. It wasn't an option for us.
Yeah, and so you found out about it, and you might have had one of those moments which was, hey, this must be too good to be true.
This is pretty darn good.
Wait a minute, this is pretty darn good. What is this? And so when you figured it all out, and I'm sure as studious as you are, you tried to dig up any too good to be true aspects of it, but you found out that it was something that was a pretty amazing vehicle for investing. And you liked it so much that you decided that you did not want to have any brick and mortar anymore or physical real estate. You were done with being a landlord. So let me ask you, why would you suggest out there that folks may take a look at this as a better alternative for them rather than being a landlord?
Wow. Man, where do I start? If you've been a landlord, you're going to love what I'm about to share with you. You know, it dawned on me that even though I was collecting rent from my properties and having cash flow coming in from my properties, there was someone else that was also collecting cash flow from my properties, and they didn't have to deal with any of the stuff that I had to deal with. Because every single time I collected rents, guess what I had to do with most of that money?
What's that?
I had to send it to the bank to pay my mortgage.
That's right.
Okay? So the bank was actually getting cash flow from my properties without having to lift a finger, without having to deal with any tenants or toilets or trash or anything. And that was a real awakening for me to kind of accept that. Because then my mind started to say, okay, how can I participate and play on that side of the table? My mentor helped me to learn how to do that. And before long, I owned a bunch of mortgage notes. However, I ran out of cash, right? You know, just like buying anything else, you buy, and then there's no more cash left. And so I had to learn how then to to attract more capital. And it has really been a wonderful journey. I've met some wonderful people, and today I've specialized in helping people learn how to get themselves into this space, even if they don't have any money. One of the biggest challenges that I have is when I'm helping people get into the mortgage note space that are wealthy. And I have several wealthy clients, and they're moving their money out of the stock market into mortgage notes. The problem that I have with them is they want to put their money to work, their own money to work. And what I try to teach them is that there's a bigger picture here that you need to see. Eventually, you're going to run out of capital. And if you can learn what I'm trying to teach you, then you will be able to build a huge mortgage note portfolio, because it's not about how much money you have. So some of my favorite people to help are people that don't have a lot of money, you know, because they can turn their lives around. And I've seen it happen in just a few short years. It's amazing. But you got to come in with the right attitude.
Well, I always wondered. I mean, it's like, look, if you're paying a mortgage payment on the rental house that you own, and there's a renter in there, how much rent you collect, then based on how much you pay to your bank for the mortgage, there's only a little bit of cash flow that's positive on those rental properties generally.
That's true.
And what happens when you're the guy who needs to replace the $10,000 roof?
Yeah, I know.
I mean, how many months of owning that rental property does it take to catch back up from a $10,000 roof project?
If ever. See, I look at it this way. You can never catch back up. All you can do is just keep moving forward, right? That's the path. It's gone.
Well, I mean, it seems like then most of the rental portfolio guys who have been successful really bank on that appreciation over time and hoping that real estate is going to continue rising in value so that they can continue to leverage that value, right, and keep building their portfolio. What happens when people are doing that, say in 2006, 2005?
Yeah, I know. When
the market was hot. Didn't a lot of people with rental properties get themselves in trouble because they over-leveraged and bought properties that now were devalued?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it happens.
So we can't always count on the market going up. And I think right now you may agree that the market is a little bit overinflated. I think people are kind of freaked out about it, in fact, because it's crazy.
Yeah, I think it's a little overheated, and I expect a correction, Patrick.
Yeah, and that's one of those things where we can maybe help explain to the folks that are listening that you can utilize mortgage note investing kind of as a hedge against a market turn down, a hedge against a real estate market turn down, and even a hedge against maybe a stock market fallout. And so those are things we're going to get into here in a little bit. But also, when we come back from the break here in a minute, Des, maybe the folks need kind of a real world understanding of a note investment. So I want you to think of, while we're on break, maybe a note investment that you've had in your portfolio, something simple and easy to describe to the folks where they can really wrap their mind around an actual note investment and kind of how it turned out, okay? Mm-hmm. How it turned out. What'd you invest? What ultimately was the ROI and such? And also, I think maybe let's cover some common risks. I always hear people say, well, notes are new to me. I've never heard about this. It seems too good to be true. So wait a minute. How can I lose my money? So maybe we can go over that, right?
Yeah.
Give them the risks associated with that, and then also ultimately, Des, what we're trying to teach people: how can people make money in note investing, right? We'll go over that after the break, guys. And so, folks, it's time to take a quick commercial break. You're listening to the Real Men of Real Estate radio show on KCAA with your host Patrick Franz, the Note Mentor. When we come back, we're going to continue with Desi Arnaz, professional investor. Don't go anywhere; you don't want to miss it.